Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. Today we're going to cover pivot tables in part 7. Pivot tables are just a way to really kind of digest your data easier. Essentially, usually you get data in table form or in big columns. So you have some kind of identifier, maybe some numbers, some categories, maybe some booleans, which would be true, false, or yes, no. However, humans, we're not very good at understanding this data. So if I were to ask you, which store sells the most product, I don't think you could quickly tell me that. But I will show you a way you could quickly tell me that and quickly get to that answer. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to select our data. We're going to go to Insert. So now we've been focusing mostly on the Home tab. We're going to Insert. And then the very first element is pivot table. Select pivot table. It'll pop up this wizard. Essentially it says select table or range you want. We have already selected that. You could also use an external data source. And we could also choose where the pivot report is kind of spit out. To make it a little bit cleaner, we usually put it on a new worksheet. You could put it on the existing worksheet and it will get placed somewhere over here. But we'll put it on a new worksheet. And we'll call it pivot 1 pivot table, because our pivot 1 data. So as you can see, this is our data. What we do is we click here just to kind of make sure you're focused on the table. If you click away, you'll lose the all the options. Click here to build the report. Now as you see, you can have all your columns right here in your pivot table fields. What we can do is we can build our own custom table based off a filter, column, row, and values. First, we're going to show you a very basic comparison. What we're going to do is we're going to put our date in the columns. And then what we're also going to do is put our sales as values. Right now this is sum of sales. We can change that right here by go to value field settings. We can make this a count. We can make it an average. We can make it max, min, product, a bunch of different Excel functions. So we'll leave it at sum. Going back here, you can also go to value field settings and go to your number format. So we're at the same menu. And you can also change your number to show less decimals or more decimals. We'll show, to keep this table clean, we'll get rid of decimals. And Excel will do the rounding. Now we know how many sales we've had per day for the past week. Also our grand total. What's frustrating to me is these numbers are not currencies. I actually meant to change that. I'm going to go in just for redundancy to show you again. Go to value field settings. Go to number format. And we're going to go to currency. Beautiful. As you can see, this is now currency, so it makes sense that this table is representing sales. Alright, so here's one question we can ask. We can say, hey, does sales work? So we have this sales column right here. When we put out a sale, does the company sell more? So we'll put sales as columns and dates as rows. So we get a nice comparison. This is our 7-day span and whether or not we had sales on those days. Some stores have sales on some days and some don't. We'll refer to the data. Friday and Saturday looks like they usually have sales. Looks like Monday, the weekdays typically don't have sales except for a couple stores on Thursdays. So we'll go back here and we can see that regardless of if it's a sale or not sale day, the grand total is fairly similar. There's a decent range there, and that deviation is too short of a scope to really understand why. But it looks like the sales aren't generating that much more money. That's just another example of why the pivot table can answer questions super quick. Alright, we'll get rid of sales. We'll put date back into rows, columns. And now what we can do is we can analyze per store. So, one of the questions I asked in the beginning was, what store performs the best? What store has the highest sales? We'll put that in our rows. And now we can quickly see which stores are performing the best. For example, in this week span, our Parker store has sold $5,600 worth of goods, whereas our Bailey store has only sold $3,480. We can also look at this slice and diced by day. And a good way to do that, seeing as we cannot really identify days with dates, it looks like we're open 7 days a week. What if our boss gave us a project and said, hey, what day looks best to not be open? We want to give our employees more of a break. We'll get rid of date, and we'll put day in the column. So essentially what our boss is asking is, which day has the least amount of sales? Which day can we close a shop and have the least amount of risk? The day with the least amount of sales is Thursday. Very close to Monday, however. So what we would do is we suggest to our boss, Monday or Thursday has the lowest amount of sales, so maybe it would be good to close then. Alright, as you can see, we slice and diced our data. We can also use filters, so I'll actually show you this because we're not using filters in the last case. We could filter, we'll select both, so it would just be the full table. But we could also get rid of all the sales, so we could only have sale days. So now every day that's a sale day, how much money was generated from those sales. We could also say, we want to just look at our regular shop hours and see how good we're doing. Next, I will show you what not to do when creating a pivot table. So this is our data. This data is a little bit different than our sales data from our retail stores. Here we're a biologist and we're going around the world and we're collecting samples on a range of frogs, rabbits, and fish. So to create our pivot table, like last time, we select our data. So let's select our data. Notice how this time I'm selecting it by the columns. So I'm not going down here and selecting the data perfectly. I'm selecting by columns. If we insert a pivot table, we already have our range selected to a new worksheet. Test, I will call this pivot table. Now if we add animals and columns, we'll add weight and values. It looks like this is count, so we can always change that to average or sum. And we will put location and rows. You notice how we're getting these blank. We're getting a blank here, and we're getting a blank here. To get rid of that, you could select the cell and just get rid of the text, and it gives you a little padding column and row. However, that's not supposed to be there. The reason that was there was because I selected these columns instead of cleanly selecting the data. For a pivot table, you want to cleanly select the data. I'm selecting the range. I'm going to delete that test pivot table. Now I'm going to insert a proper pivot table. We already have our range selected to a new worksheet. Pivot to pivot table. Put that right here. Now we have our data, our pivot table, our data, our pivot table. Going back to our data, we have animal, what color that animal is, the location, and the average weight, or the weight of a collected sample of that animal, I should say. So first, what we're going to do is we're going to look at animal by weight. So a little bit of this might be similar to the first pivot table. This is to show you the workflow necessary to make a pivot table, and maybe any contingencies you might need to know. So first, we'll put an animal in the columns. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to put weight as values. As you can see, this is a sum of weight. We're more interested in average weights because we collected a bunch of animals. We want to make sure populations are healthy. So we'll go to value field settings. We're going to change this to average. And we can change the number format. We can go less or more decimals. 2 decimals looks good in this case if we're working with kilograms. So we will leave that there. As you can see, the table is updated to average of weight, not sum of weight. Ooh, we lost the number formatting and we don't have 2 decimals anymore. Ooh. Sorry, I double clicked on my table and it expanded out. So actually, since I changed the value field settings to average, we have lost the number format. I'm going to make sure we only have 2 decimals, just so it's a little bit easier. As you can see, once I hit OK, the table will revert down to 2 decimals. Alright, so now we have, we know fish on average weigh 10.82 kilograms in this study. Frogs and rabbits. Also, those are some large animals. So what we can do is we can say, hey, we're interested in location now. These were collected all over the world. How can we get a more granular look at this data? So if we add to rows, we'll add location. And as you can see, now actually, what you can do is you can still center these. So you can, this is a table. You're not allowed to change this data, but however, you can still format this data. Okay, so now we can see from a much more granular scale what the fish weight distribution is between all these different locations. We can see frogs, we can see rabbit. It also gives us the average weights of all animals in Easton, or per location, also per animal. Now this is a two-dimensional table. We have an X and a Y, and then we have a corresponding value for it. What if we were to add another dimension on columns? That works very well. And what this does is this gives us almost little subsets of data. So what we can do is we can say, hey, let's look at just our fish for a bit. We can digest the data, and then once we're done, we can collapse fish. Now the fish data gets collapsed, and you don't have to worry about color. So now this is just the complete big picture of the fish data. Same with frog. As you can see, we have this granular data, but we could also collapse it. So now lastly, we have the rabbit data. We can collapse that as well. And that looks similar to a table that didn't have color. One more lesson. You can use pivot tables as references for formulas. For example, this is going to be redundant because we already have some here, but we can say, give me the sum of these grand totals. We get the same number. Ooh, excuse me. That is not the same number. That would be average. If we get the average of these numbers, we'll get the same number. Sorry about that. I was reading my notes at the same time. So this is really important. Pivot tables are real. We can use them. We can make decisions off of them. It's a lot easier to find, the average weight of all these animals than going into here and sorting it out per species and in color. Lastly, the difference between building and using a pivot table. For example, if we built this table by hand, I will copy it and bring it into another sheet. Table 2. Oop, we're going to paste this value. This table is super useful. We don't need this. We know it's average of weight. This table is super useful. We can format it. We can make it digestible. However, what if I want to look at this data from a different perspective, a different slice of data? How can I do that? You really can't. This is fixed. I can't add a new dimension. I can't change it from a different date range. I'm really fixed, and that's where the advantage of the pivot table comes in. You have new data, you added new colors in, boom, you can bring colors in and it'll update. And I will actually show you how the data can change live. This is actually, I lied to you when I said one of the last lessons is referencing data in a pivot table. One is looking at its live updating. I want to make sure you guys understand that this table is live and connected to this data. So essentially we'll say, look at the rabbit is 10.5 kilograms on average. We're going to change one of these rabbits to super high weight. Go to our pivot table, right click, and we hit refresh. As you can see, the table is updated, with this new rabbit weight, and so as the grand totals and everything kind of downstream from that. I want to thank you guys very much for joining us today for pivot tables. These are a powerful tool, and I expect you guys to add a lot of value wherever you are using pivot tables. Thank you very much.